Hey folks, in this tutorial I'm going to be giving you a very simple introduction to expressions in Adobe After Effects. Now to get started, I've got an animation in my timeline here, a very simple one, of a rectangle moving right across the screen and then back to left. But it stops at 2 seconds. Now if I wanted that animation to continue all the way along the timeline, up until 10 seconds, you could do a fairly straightforward job of just cutting and pasting these keyframes and duplicating them along the timeline. But that's a little bit tedious and a bit laborious. And this is where expressions can come in to help us. We can use expressions to repeat these 3 keyframes here so that they loop in a cycle along the timeline. Now to do that, we need to click on the stopwatch here whilst pressing the Alt key. So click on Alt on the position keyframe and this dialog box pops up. I'm going to type in loop out with a capital O, bracket, speech mark, cycle, speech mark, close bracket, and then I'm going to click off. This expression that we've just typed in will now repeat the cycle of the animation. Let's give it a preview. There we go. So although we had just 3 keyframes, a very simple expression, in this case loop out cycle, has helped us to animate the object across the timeline for the entire duration. I'm going to grab these 3 keyframes and I'm going to move them up to the 3-second mark. If I now give a round preview, something different's happened. There's no animation until the 3-second mark, and then the loop out cycle begins again. And the reason is this: because we've called it loop out, it's not starting the animation until this keyframe here. In a sense, it's actually looping out from this keyframe at the very beginning, this one that I'm just highlighting. So it's looping out and animating from that point, but not before. So this point here from 0 to 3, there's no animation. When it hits 3 though, it loops out from that keyframe and continues looping. We can change this though. If we click back on the dialog box here and put it back to, say, loop in, something different happens. What happens now is that it starts animating from the beginning and it's looping in or cycling the animation up until here, where it now stops. So the difference is that it's actually beginning at the start of the timeline and it's working its way, or it's looping in to this keyframe here. It's working its way towards that keyframe, so it will loop in to that point and then stop. So it's worth playing with loop in and loop out. It just gives you a bit more control about when the animation might start cycling or looping. Now the loop expression can also be applied to other parameters as well, not just the position one. So I'm just going to actually delete that. I'm going to delete those keyframes as well and just try something a little different. Let's try rotation. I'm going to set a keyframe here and I'm going to go to 1 second and then, whoops, let me just reset that. I'm going to set that for 2, and then what we should have now hopefully is a fairly simple, very simple rotation. Let's have a look. There we go, simple rotation over 1 second, but as we saw, it does stop at the 1 second point. But I can use the loop expression to continue the rotation all the way through. So Alt click again on the stopwatch, type in loop capital out, bracket, speech mark, cycle, speech mark, close bracket. And I think, oh, let me just redo that. I just missed out slightly the last speech mark there. That was to do that again. That's better. That's more like it. And let's just preview that, see what we got. Excellent. There we go. The rotation continues throughout the entire duration of the timeline. And again, it will work in the same way. If we actually grab those and move them up the timeline, the rotation won't begin until that point. And if we put it back to, say, loop in, like so. It'll animate and rotate all the way to the final keyframe here, and then stop after that. Okay folks, have a little play with loop in and loop out. They're nice simple ways to repeat animations along a timeline. Okay folks, hope you found that useful. See you in the next tutorial.